Hello and welcome to the World Wanderers podcast, a proud part of the Wander Barn Podcast Network.
I'm Ryan.
I'm Amanda.
And we're your hosts.
We're a traveling couple and digital nomads taking you on our adventures as we explore locations, destinations, and careers.
Enjoy the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back for another episode of the World Wanderers podcast. We are super excited that you're joining us for today's episode of the show. And as always, we're super grateful that you've decided to listen to this episode and our podcast in general. We know there are lots of podcasts for you to choose from, and so we're grateful that you're here in our little corner of the internet today. And this week on the podcast, we have an awesome guest. We're joined by Mikkel Thorup. Mikkel is the founder of Expat Money, a #1 best-selling author, and a podcast host himself. After dropping out of school at 12 years old, he started traveling the world as a teenager. And in the last 22 years, he's visited over 100 countries, lived in 9, and circumnavigated the globe over 400 times. And since 2017, he's been working with private clients to move them offshore to legally save on taxes, acquire second passports and residencies, and invest in foreign real estate, and much more. So in this episode, Mikkel shares his travel story, what it was like traveling as a teenager, and how years of backpacking turned into living in 9 countries and starting a business abroad. He shares how he helps his clients at Expat Money and a few things to consider when it comes to moving abroad and much more. So this is a really awesome, fun episode. We hope you enjoy it as much as we did. And we're going to pop into that in just a second, but I just wanted to remind you, if you are interested in working and living abroad, to check out the World Wanderers Insider. We have lots of awesome episodes talking about how to get started as a digital nomad. So if you're interested in that, head on over to patreon.com/The World Wanderers. All right, that's all from me. I'm excited for you to hear this episode. And without further ado, here is Mikkel.
All right. Very excited to have you on the show, Mikkel. Thanks for taking the time to talk to us.
Absolutely, Ryan. I'm really excited about this. An amazing show, amazing audience you guys have. So hopefully be able to inspire and maybe educate or give some people some insights from your audience today. So I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, and we always like to kick the show off by asking our guest whereabouts in the world they are. Where are you coming to us from?
Yeah, so I'm in Panama City, Panama. I've been living here in Panama for a couple of years now. And it's beautiful. Nice, well, not too sunny of a day today, but still a nice warm day here in Panama, you could say.
Yeah, I feel like nice and warm is like as cold as it gets in Panama City.
Yeah, Panama's not known for the cold weather, that's for sure. But I was born in southwestern Ontario, so I'm used to about a couple of feet of, maybe not right now snow, but getting pretty close to having snow on the ground. So I'll take the warm weather any day.
Yeah, for sure. We're both Canadian as well, so definitely feel that. And then we were actually living in Panama kind of pre-pandemic. We made the decision to leave and go back to Canada in the middle of March 2020 when the pandemic hit. And we're itching to get back to Panama. We've been based in Mexico for the last couple of years, but yeah, I would love to get back to Panama. So I feel like as you're talking, I'm going to be thinking about all the things that I miss about Panama City.
Well, when you guys come down, let me know. Me and my wife will take you guys out for dinner, and Panama's amazing. We know every little nook and cranny, the best restaurants, the best bars here. I just love it here. I think it's amazing.
Yeah, that's amazing. We'll have to get into how you got there, but maybe let's back up a little bit. Can you tell us about your travel story, how you first got interested in travel?
Yeah, sure. For my story, I have to go quite far back in time, but I will try to make it as concise as possible. So what happened, Amanda, was I was actually diagnosed with a learning disability when I was a child. And the teacher pulled me out of class and sat me down in a little room, and the principal and vice principal and maybe a resource teacher or something was there. And they sat me down and they said, Mikkel, something doesn't work quite right with your brain. And what we want to do is we want to send you to a special school for special boys. So that's what they did. Every day for 3 years, I got on a little white bus, took a little white bus across town, and I went to this quote unquote special school. Now, the only problem was that it actually was not a special school. It was a regular school with a special class. So you can probably imagine what happened. I got in a ton of fights. I got picked on. I got bullied. And it was just generally not a great experience. Now, this is no woe is me, poor Mikkel victim mentality type of story. Certainly not. I mean, I got hit. I hit back twice as hard if I could. So, I would never claim otherwise. But after 3 years of this, I got to go back to my neighborhood school. And I thought, wow, this is going to be so amazing. My friends will have missed me so much, and everyone's going to be so excited to see me. And, day one of school, you can probably once again imagine what happened. Everybody started whispering and gossiping. Oh, I know, Mikkel. He went to some retard school. Thanks, guys. Totally politically correct, totally sensitive. You know how kids are. Really appreciate that. But yeah, I really didn't like school after all of this experience. So I stopped going, and then I would fail, and then they would send me to summer school, and then I'd fail that, and somehow I'd get pushed into the next year, and then I would fail all of that. Well, long story short, at 12 years old, I stopped going to school, and at 15, I officially dropped out, and I started traveling internationally not long after that. And when I started traveling, I started meeting all these incredible people who were exploring the world, and they were doing things completely different. They were learning things differently. They were expressing themselves differently. And there's just everything was completely different. And they didn't know my story of going to, this special school. And side note, my learning disability is dyslexia, which, now we kind of know in today's day and age is really not a big deal. But in the 1980s, it certainly appeared to be. So yeah, fast forward, and for the last 22, almost 23 years straight, I've been on the road. I've been traveling. I've circumnavigated the globe over 400 times. I've visited, I think we're up to 110 countries now, and I've lived in 9 different countries. So I've built my entire life around traveling and exploring the world. It's from the personal side, from the business side, from the hobby side, for really everything is devoted to living overseas and exploring this beautiful planet of ours. So that's kind of my story. And I know I kind of dropped a lot of things there, and happy to go in any direction you like. But yeah, that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about what those like early teenage adventures were like. Was that stuff where you and your parents went out, or I know it's pretty uncommon for someone to drop out of school at that age and start going to explore the world. But what did that look like?
Yeah. So when I was a teenager, when I was a child and a teenager, I was really big into martial arts. Like, it was my whole life. And it was the one thing that I really, really excelled at. And I had an opportunity to join Team Canada. Like I said, I'm Canadian citizen. So I was on Team Canada for martial arts. And my first trip was, besides the United States and Canada and little things like that, my first big international trip, I was a teenager, and I went to Ireland, England, and Wales. And I got to compete in the Worlds at this tournament. And I didn't do too bad either. I actually did pretty good. But it was interesting because my father had taught me or told me that traveling was the best thing he ever did with his life. He had, backpack around Europe for a couple of months when he was in his 20s. And then I got to see this, with him when I was on Team Canada as a teenager. And I thought, oh my God, he's totally right. This is unbelievable. And, the only thing that didn't make sense to me was like, if he said it's the best thing he ever did with his life, why didn't he do more of it? So after I had done this trip, I was working at just whatever random part-time job or full-time job I could get after I left school, and I started saving money. And I headed back to Europe when I was 19, and I did 3-4 months in Western Europe. So all the regular countries that you would expect, but then got really low on funds. So I had heard about Morocco. This was back in, I don't know, early 2000s. And I took a ferry over to Tangiers, and I spent the next 2 months backpacking around Morocco. I actually went to Algeria on a camel across the Sahara Desert for 3-4 days, and then turned around and came back. So I was pretty crazy or adventurous during those early years of travel. But yeah, that spark and that love of travel just has never left me.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's really inspiring to hear. And it's so cool to just imagine, you as a teenager doing those adventures, like, going across the desert on a camel. And I feel like there's just some adventures that are really amazing to do when you're young and you're just like a little bit more, I guess, like interested in taking risks or not as concerned about like safety and stuff like that. And so it's cool to hear that you had that. And then, so can you tell us a little bit about, I guess, your journey with travel? Like at some point, I'm imagining you must have been like, hey, I need to work, I need to make some money. How did it kind of look as you got a little bit older, like into your 20s? Like, were you based somewhere working and taking trips, or what did that look like?
Yeah. So I describe myself as an expat, hence my podcast, The Expat Money Show, my website, expatmoney.com, the book, everything like that. So I follow what I affectionately call the hub and spoke model. I will have a base in a country, ideally with a really fantastic international airport. And I use that to travel out from. So, okay, when I was, in my teens and my 20s, I was doing a lot of backpacking. I took 18 months and I hitchhiked through Central and South America. But as I started to grow and get a little bit more experience, I would just live in a country and then travel out from there. Now, as for the financial side, I just started, working whatever jobs I could. I did a lot of hospitality work and things like that, but eventually got really interested in finance and investing and these types of things. So I actually traded derivatives for about 7 years and was really big into the financial markets, and then got into entrepreneurship later on. And when I started my podcast, the Expat Money Show, about 7 years ago, I took my two big loves, which was travel and living overseas, and finance and entrepreneurship, and just kind of mashed the two together and called it Expat Money. I know, very creative term. I'm such a creative guy, but but yeah, that's kind of how I finance things. I just was scraping together money any way I could, and then what money I didn't spend on traveling, I started investing and started growing that. And then I started building businesses based around these loves and passions that I have.
Yeah. And so in those kind of earlier years, were there some countries where you were like living and working jobs there, like working local jobs?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's see. All right. I lived in Western Canada for 18 months. So Banff and Lake Louise, which you guys probably know. Then I was in Guatemala for 6 months, a year in New Zealand, and I traveled all over New Zealand and lived in Wellington and in the South Island and everything like that. Then I was 3 years in Melbourne, Australia, down in St. Kilda area and Elstonwick and those areas by the beach. Then I was 12 months in Singapore, and I worked for the largest property developer in Singapore, Far East organization. Then I was 366 days in the Arctic, working up there. And then 8 years in Abu Dhabi. So that was a really great experience and a fantastic tax-free experience. Which was an amazing opportunity to travel out from there. Like, I visited most of the Middle Eastern countries and GCC countries from there. And then we've been in Panama for 3.5, going on 4 years here. And where else did I live? I lived in Brazil for 6 months in Florianopolis, in a small island in the south of Brazil. And all these places, just kind of traveled out from there. And so half of it was probably working for random jobs, and then half of it was entrepreneurship and building my own business and investing and those types of things.
Yeah. And how did you go about, you're in Singapore for a year, you're starting to get itchy feet. Like, how does that work for you when you're thinking like, oh, I want to go somewhere new, just like looking for opportunities other places? Or how did you decide when it was time to move on from places?
Yeah, each place has had its own signals to me. When I lived in Melbourne, I thought, this is great. I'll go for citizenship. I just loved it there. But as you do, I met a girl and I followed the girl to Singapore. She was Singaporean. And, when we were there for a year, and I think Singapore is an amazing place to spend time or to visit as a tourist or as a traveler, but to live there, I really didn't care for it. Yeah, it was this weird dynamic. I understand Asian culture very well, especially give face and company first type of things. But we would start at 8 o'clock in the morning and finish at 10 o'clock at night. And if I wanted to get out there, or if I wanted to leave at 10 o'clock to catch the last train home on the purple line to get home, I'd be seen as leaving early. And some people would be there until midnight and they'd only sleep like 5-6 hours. And I'm like, this is awful. Like, I don't want to do this at all. So I was kind of done. And then my ex had lived in Greenland at some point, and she really liked the Arctic. So she started looking for jobs in the Arctic. And that's how we ended up leaving Singapore. Now, as I said, I'm no longer with her. I married a completely different girl in a very different situation, but traveled a lot with my wife now, and we make decisions together about where we want to be, and what we're looking for out of a country, and what our values are, and what we can add to a country and a community as well. So it's kind of a joint venture now, you could say.
Yeah, absolutely. We can definitely relate to that. And I think it's interesting because I think a lot of people can probably relate to those early experiences, even the experience of your dad talking about like, oh, I did this big trip. It was like the best thing I've ever done. It was such a great experience. But then we kind of return to life and kind of the rhythm we feel like we need to be in, like leave Canada, go for a cool adventure, love it, come back and feel like, oh, I've just got to be here. I'm curious for you, what made you think, did you ever kind of deal with that of like, oh, I grew up here, I want to be close to family, and those feelings of like, I should just be in Canada?
No.
I was kind of guessing that was going to be the answer as I was asking it.
Yeah, no, that was never me.
It is always interesting to talk to people who, because some people are just like, oh, I just, I get homesick. I really want to go back to where I'm from. And then there's other people who are like, it was great that I was born there or that I live there, but I just don't really feel any ties there. And so it's always interesting to hear how people feel either way. And one thing I'm curious about is I'm guessing 3.5, 4 years you would have moved to Panama kind of pre-pandemic. What inspired you and your wife to choose Panama?
So that's a good question. My wife and I lived in the Middle East for a long time, and we loved our experience there. I thought it was so great. However, there was a lot of tension in the area when we were starting to make the decision to leave. So the US was getting especially aggressive with Iran, a country that I've had the privilege to go to and see. And, we were in Abu Dhabi, not right next door, but close enough to a couple of nuclear power plants that are being built there. It's the largest development of nuclear power plants. They're putting up 11 reactors there. Now, it doesn't take a genius to kind of figure that if the US has moved their aircraft carriers in there, and if something happens and there is a war, God forbid, that breaks out, and they're using the UAE as a staging ground or one of a couple of staging grounds, and Iran wanted to lash out that, this type of area, these power plants would probably be a pretty high target. Now, when you add to that the energy from the nuclear power plant, 60% of it is slated to go to desalination. So basically taking salt water and turning it into drinking water through desalination. And the country is, might be energy independent, but it's certainly not food independent. And it's definitely not water independent. And you could literally fry an egg on the hood of your car during the summer months. Like it's not like air conditioning is a nice to have there. It's a must have. You'll just cook in that country. So we're seeing all this aggression and all these things taking place. And I'm a pretty outspoken libertarian. So I really believe in personal responsibility, and looking at these types of things and not assuming that everything will be okay or someone else will always be there to care for you. And we started looking around the world at different countries that would take us in and, fit into our belief patterns and, our want and need for, a really family stable type of country and family first type of country. And because I work in this industry, I know most of the visas that are available. And Panama was at the absolute top of the list. You start creating a bit of a matrix and, like wants and needs. And Panama was just winning on every single one of these. It was just ticking the box. Now, I had been here in, 2002 or something when I hitchhiked through the area, and I had fond memories. My wife had not been out here, so she kind of took a leap of faith. But we found a place online, got that sorted, showed up with all of our bags, and got our residency, and and it's worked out really well. We're really happy with the decision here, and it still ticks a lot of the boxes for us. So we really love it here.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. That's really awesome to hear. And I think that we definitely felt pretty aligned with a lot of what you're talking about as well when we were thinking about Panama. Unfortunately, we weren't there long enough to get our residency. It was something we were kind of looking into, and then pandemic hit. And since then, we've ended up getting residency in Mexico. But I think Panama is still kind of on our radar for future. Like, it's such an amazing country. There's so much to see there. It's kind of like right in between being able to go Central America, North America, and then South America as well. So lots of good travel opportunities and great airport, great climate, all that stuff. So definitely a good place to call home, I think.
Absolutely. Well, it's a shame you didn't get your residency, because at that time it would have gone from, it was a $5,000 bank deposit. It's since gone to a $200,000 real estate investment. So a big jump in price. So it's a real shame. I know Mexico has a good residency program as well. Not the only problem, but one of the problems with Mexico, though, is they have a pretty aggressive tax system. I mean, the marginal tax rate in Mexico goes up to 35%. If you structure things correctly in Panama, it's zero tax. So, that's pretty attractive as well.
Yeah, definitely. That was certainly something that we were interested in when we were looking. And yeah, we've since heard that they've changed things, and it obviously is kind of like, oh crap, we should have, got on that. We probably did have enough time to do it. It's just, we weren't sure. Like, it was one of those things where we're like, hey, let's check out this country. We'd never really been before. Let's spend some time, see if it's actually somewhere we want to get residency. And I think, hindsight's 2020, right? Had we
of course
known what was going to happen, we probably would have jumped on that right away. But things happen as they're supposed to. So if we're meant to be residents of Panama, it'll work itself out in the end. But Mexico's been good to us for now.
Amazing.
Yeah. And so how did you kind of make the jump from someone who's kind of going through this, doing this, working in different countries, obviously going through like the process of residencies and visas for yourself, to like, oh, this is something I want to create a business around. This is something I want to kind of help other people with?
Yeah, so I had always kind of geeked out on these things, figuring out ways to legally reduce my tax bill, all the different residencies I've had in my life, lots of trial and error, and being a guinea pig through these types of things. And as I said earlier, I had such a passion for finance, and then later on entrepreneurship. And I just wanted to do something where I could share a lot of this knowledge and just kind of put the two of it together. And I was working, consulting all the way 6-7 years ago, helping people to figure these things out. But it was kind of on the side, and, as I was doing other things. And then once I started this, I just enjoyed it so much that I was able to, make a full-time income. And nowadays, I mean, it's a 7-figure, probably maybe not tomorrow, but soon going to be an 8-figure business doing these types of things. So, I'm able to help a lot of people, and it really speaks to my values. And I just think it's so much fun to work in this industry. It's like what do they say? It's like an itch, that has to be scratched. So it's like, the more I figure out, the more I want to figure out. And it's just a giant puzzle. Like, I just love it, understanding the world and seeing how everything fits together, and, how to help people to have more freedom in their life. Like, I think it's just the greatest thing I could do.
Yeah, that's really, really inspiring to hear. And so you've been doing this specific type of work since 2017, correct?
Correct. Yep. Under the Expat Money brand. As I said, I was doing consulting. I was helping people figure this out on the separately, but since 2017, I've had the consulting firm.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's where I was going with my question. I was curious kind of, the progression of it. Like, did you jump right in having a business or, consulting and then creating the business? So awesome to hear that you were consulting and then creating the business. And so maybe we can dive into Expat Money and what you do a little bit more and just talk about, for people out there who aren't super familiar with the idea of moving away from home and actually getting a residency, looking at changing your tax residency, buying property overseas, et cetera, et cetera. Can you just give us kind of a high level overview of what it is that you do and how you support people in that way?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I said earlier, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a CPA or anything like that. I'm an advisor. I'm a coach or a consultant, whatever kind of word or vocabulary you want to use. But I work in a number of different tracks. So we work with the residency, which is the legal right to live and work in a country. And I specifically work in permanent residencies. I don't deal with, student visas or these types of things. I deal mostly with permanent residencies. Then citizenship. So naturalization, citizenship by investment, citizenship by ancestry, marriage, birth, these types of citizenships, getting second passports. Then we deal with the tax issues or the tax consequences. So these would be the tax issues of leaving the United States or Canada or Great Britain or Australia or wherever this might be. But, what are your obligations to your home country when you leave? Then what are the obligations to the new jurisdiction that you're entering into? We also deal with a lot of the restructuring of businesses, wealth, brokerage accounts, anything like this. So this can be LLCs, IBCs, trusts, foundations. And this might be the jurisdiction that you have your residency or your new citizenship in, but it might be a completely different one. We might use something that is not already part of the puzzle. So what are your tax obligations in that country? And then we deal with the real estate, like, where are you going to live? And can we get a residency or a citizenship on the back of this real estate investment? But also, if you want to get your money out of your home country, then what are you putting it into? So maybe investment properties, that could be short-term or long-term rentals. That can just be buy and hold. That can be many different things. So it's those, 5 or 6 different tracks that I work in. So it's really about moving yourself, your business, or your wealth offshore. I don't deal with every country in the world. I deal pretty much exclusively with the tax favorable countries. So we look at the countries that have really strong asset protection laws and really favorable tax laws, which there's probably about 40 or 45 different countries in the world that kind of fit within this bucket. And that's really, the sweet spot for me. That's where I specialize. Now, my traveling, I like to go everywhere in the world and I want to see everything. My goal is to go to every country on planet Earth. But the business itself is helping people with what I just kind of outlined. And we do it for many different reasons. Everybody has their own reason. For me, it's a bit of fun and adventure and, my philosophical beliefs over this. Other people don't agree with what's happening with the governments and, encroachment on, personal freedoms and liberties. Some people do it for family reasons. Some people do it for economic reasons. But, that's kind of the piece where I help them is moving themselves, their business and their wealth offshore. And then we work through the whole gambit, everything that comes with that.
Yeah, awesome. And so for people who are listening and maybe haven't really everyone obviously has some experience with travel and stuff, but maybe hasn't thought about I could, move to a different country, have a way better tax bill, probably better quality of life. What are some of those countries that people might not think about, but that provide kind of this option for people?
Yeah. So one of the most popular areas is Central America these days, because most of the countries in Central America follow what's called a territorial tax system. So basically, if the money is made outside of the country, even if you live inside the country, that country will not tax you on it. So I'm talking about Panama, obviously, where I live, but also Costa Rica and Nicaragua and the other countries in this area. So they're very, very popular. Now, a lot of Caribbean countries, they follow these types of programs as well. The UAE, where I used to live in Abu Dhabi and Dubai, they don't follow a territorial tax system. They just don't have a tax system. I mean, a few years ago, they implemented a VAT and there's talk of more taxes coming in. But as it stands right now, there's no income tax, or at least while I was living there, there was no income tax whatsoever. So there's no one to pay the money to, or no one to file it to. Now, these are the countries that, are not going to charge you taxation when you live there. You might still have obligations to your home country. So that's kind of a different piece of the puzzle. But mostly in Caribbean, Latin America, and the GCC countries are the really popular ones. And then you kind of have the nearshore jurisdictions, which are popular as well. So these are kind of low tax rates, but not zero. Portugal has a non-dom tax system. Uruguay, you can get a 10-year tax holiday. You have low tax countries like Ireland, Cyprus, Montenegro, Hungary. These places, depending how you structure things and how you set them up, can be pretty good as well.
Yeah, and is this something that I think a lot of people, especially recently, found, hey, my job is allowing me to be remote, or, I'm able to do something that provides a good living, but isn't necessarily, I'm not an entrepreneur, maybe not making a ton of money. Is this something that's still like accessible for people like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I think that there's no better time in human history for these types of things. When I started traveling, I mean, the internet existed, but it certainly wasn't like it was, or like it is today. I mean, I was going to a internet cafe, maybe once in a month, and, trying to get a hold of my family or send them some information. My normal way of actually keeping in touch with my family was postcards. So forget about trying to work online or build a business online. I mean, this just was not a reality for most people. But today, I mean, you can go on Upwork, and pretty much any skill you have, you can, be a freelancer and, have clients or get hired by a company, and they don't care where you're from. I have a staff of 17 that work for my company now. And, I have one person who works with me here, and the other 16 people are all remote. I mean, that just wouldn't have been possible before. But now it's so easy, and we have all of the technology. So it doesn't matter really if you're coming at it from the entrepreneur side, or from the employee side, or just from the freelancing side. I mean, there's just amazing opportunities right now.
Yeah, that's all really interesting to hear. And I guess I'm curious if somebody's, kind of intrigued by this, and they're like, I love to travel. I, have been interested in living abroad, but I've never really considered actually, getting a residency somewhere or fully moving abroad. Like they've always kind of kept maybe a home base in a place like Canada or the US, and, businesses there, et cetera, et cetera. What are like some first steps to sort of consider, where you might want to go, what might be a good option for you, that type of thing?
Yeah, I would start with a piece of paper and a pen and try to figure out what your objectives are. What are your goals? What are your objectives? What are you trying to accomplish here? Like, if you're just trying to explore, then I mean, just pick anywhere and just go. Like, there's no wrong answer from that front. But if you say, okay, I want to live in a country which has strong family values and, a lot of community, and I want warm weather, and I want low taxes. Well, I mean, that narrows it down a lot, or if you say, okay, I want to be in a really big city and I want to have access to, everything and culture and history. And, I don't really care about taxes. It doesn't matter to me whatsoever. I'm going to pay what I'm going to pay. That might be a completely different set of countries. So I think getting kind of clear about what it is that you want, and being really brutally honest with yourself, and, who are you? What do you believe in? What is it that you want to get out of this? And then start there and working through things. As for the actual programs themselves, like where to get the residency, or how does the residency work? On our blog at expatmoney.com, we put out daily articles about different residency programs. I mean, we've got hundreds of articles up about different countries, how to get your residency, how to get a citizenship, and all that information is completely free. So that's kind of the easier part. But making that selection and creating the plan at the beginning, takes a little bit of soul searching, I would say. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely it does. And I was looking at your blog earlier today and just really impressed with how much information you guys are putting out, and just like I feel like it's definitely a great resource for people if they are interested in this, because I think that when you're kind of looking at this, if you're not super familiar with the different options, it can feel a bit overwhelming because there actually are a lot of countries that you can choose from. And so I really like your suggestion around just starting with a pen and paper, write out, what are your values? What are you looking for? What's going to be important to you in a destination? Because if you're just like, hey, there's, 5 options to choose from and I'll just like pick the one that looks the best, that's not going to be the case, because now there's so many places where you can get residency, so many places where you can get second passports, investments, so many digital nomad visas popping up. I feel like every week I'm hearing about a new country doing a new like nomad visa. So definitely lots available to expats and digital nomads, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's 193 countries in the world. Most countries in the world are quite safe and quite free countries. Kind of when we're growing up, we're led to believe that, Canada, the States, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, and maybe Western Europe are kind of, the safe countries, and the rest of the world are just savages. And they're just like, it's a jungle out there. It's like, no, there's so many amazing places to live in the world and spend time, and, I've been privileged enough to be able to explore a lot of them. So I really know from firsthand experience, and I've spent so much time going through this, as I was saying earlier in the conversation. Now, for people who need a helping hand with this, want to understand everything and, want to shortcut the process, I do work as a consultant. So, on expatmoney.com, up in the top right-hand corner, you'll see a big orange button that says work with us. I've got an important letter there. You read through that. If you think that this is something that makes sense for you, then there's an application form at the bottom, and you make an application, and I read through every single one of them myself. And I try to judge if I think that this will be a good fit and if we'll get along. And, and if this looks like a good fit, then we'll take a call together and we'll discuss. I will say completely upfront, my prices are not low. I'm actually ridiculously expensive, and that's okay. I'm set at a price point where I can help people on the one-on-one for who can really afford it. And it's really, really important. But if you're not at that high net worth individual type of level, then just go and read the blog and, read all the articles, listen to my podcast, The Expat Money Show, or join us on our summit. We have a huge summit coming up November 7th to 11th, and tickets are free for that. And we get to discuss all of these ideas, and we've got the different lawyers and service providers and all the people that I work with my private clients. And you can get a ticket for free at expatmoneysummit.com. So all the information is there, whether you need the helping hand or you want to do it yourself. It's all there for you. So we try to be fair to everyone.
Yeah, awesome. We'll make sure links to all that get into the show notes as well, so people can go check that out. And before we let you go, Mikkel, I'd love to get a travel tip or two. You mentioned kind of having this view of like, we think of all these places as being like savage, crazy. I know for us as travelers, like sometimes you go to a country and you're just like so pleasantly surprised based off what you've heard before. Purely from the travel and exploring side, what would be like countries for you that have like really surprised you and you think like more people ought to travel and explore these countries?
Okay, that's a good question. I like to go to a lot of the really different countries and the countries that most people would not go to. And I like to make up my own mind. So I'm really big into geopolitics, and I spend a lot of time trying to understand geopolitics. And, I had a chance to go to North Korea a few years ago, and it was such a wild, wild experience. And it was so different than so many people normally would talk of, and, this axis of evil and everything like that. I mean, the government is kooky. Like I would never claim otherwise. The government is very, very kooky, but most governments are. I'm not a big fan of big top-down types of systems. But I actually found that a lot of the people were pretty much normal, like quite regular. I mean, yes, there's a lot of brainwashing there, but while we were there, we got to do a lot of normal things. We went to the circus, we rode the subway, we went to museums, we got to speak with people and just chit chat and learn about their lives and, you know, their family and their kids and what they eat for food and their history. And I thought that was really, really cool. I mentioned Iran earlier. I had a chance to go to Iran. That was one of the most gorgeous countries I've ever went to. And the people were fantastic. Once again, crazy government, but amazing people. I've drove across Africa. You know, I went to Uganda probably 10 years ago and, you know, got to hike with silverback mountain gorillas. And we reckon we were the only tourists on planet Earth that day to see silverback mountain gorillas in their natural habitat. And it was such a pleasant surprise. Now I actually sit on the board of directors for a nonprofit in Uganda called 1018. It's 1018.org. And we actually help teen mothers in the slums of Uganda to learn new skills to be able to provide for themselves. So entrepreneurship, really. And we funded a big literacy program where we took 60 girls who didn't know how to read and write. And we taught them, you know, basic arithmetic, reading and writing. And now they're on to these skills for life where they're, you know, learning seamstress and hairdressing, and they're starting to provide for themselves and for their babies. And, you know, we feed, I think it's over 1,700 people a month now. You know, so I work with an organization there. So I like to go to all these really different countries and try to understand things and the perspective from the people who live there, not just what I see on mainstream media.
Yeah, I think that that's so important too. And I'm glad that you shared that. Like, I think there's obviously, you know, real situations in countries and in the world that we need to consider when we're deciding to travel somewhere or not. But I also think that if you like just follow the news, it's like you're honestly probably not even going to leave your house. It doesn't matter where you live. A lot of places will just seem kind of scary and unsafe. So I think that's an important reminder that the world can be, you know, a really magical, beautiful place. And there's so many amazing people that we can meet and experiences to have. So really love that and have just loved this conversation. You're just a wealth of knowledge, Mikkel. And I know you listed, you know, a couple places people can go to find you, you know, the upcoming summit you've got, your website, book, anywhere else people can go to get in touch with you, find you, check you out online.
No, I think those are the main places. Yeah, the summit is expatmoneysummit.com. The website is expatmoney.com. And then the podcast, you know, you can listen on, you know, wherever you're listening to today's conversation, any popular podcasting app, and just search for Expat Money Show. The only other one I can think of, if you're really curious, is go on Amazon. I have a book. It's called Expat Secrets: How to Pay Zero Taxes, Live Overseas, and Make Giant Piles of Money. Super humble title. I know I'm just a really humble guy. That's how I roll. So
I personally love it.
I got so many comments from that when I put it out. I thought it was funny, but it's true. I mean, it's really, really, really true. You know, when you start living overseas and you figure out all of these different things and how it all fits together and how to legally reduce your tax bill, I mean, you really can build something really special, and you can give back and you can help. And you know, and it can all be yours. You can have everything. I mean, I'm a really happy, upbeat guy. I have a gorgeous wife from China who I adore. We have 2 amazing children. You know, my kids are born overseas. They've traveled a ton. You know, we're a multilingual family. You know, building a business, helping all these types of things, you know, and that's what I do with my work, you know, through the summit, through the blog, through the podcast, and through the book that I just mentioned. So yes, very much happy to take care of your people, Amanda and Ryan. So, you know, reach out to me. Happy to help.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thanks, Mikkel.
Pleasure's all mine. Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to this episode. If you want more, make sure to check out The World Wanderers Insider, available on Patreon at patreon.com/theworldwanderers.
For show notes, head over to theworldwanderers.com. Find us on social media at The World Wanderers Podcast and join the private Facebook community at World Wanderers, a community for travelers.
You can always get in touch with us at info@theworldwanderers.com. And if you enjoyed the show, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. It really helps us find new listeners.
See you next time.